then he sits down and then John Fleming gets up. So thank you so much for being here. This is kind of the longest event that Niall and myself have ever done. We couldn't have done it without Deirdre Geraghty from the DLR Carnegie Library. I was talking to Michael during the week just about how excited we are about this day. And part of the reason is because this is sacred ground for us. Like, this is a library that my father used to bring the 5 of us on a Saturday to. And it just was so exciting. Books opened up avenues for me in particular, for everyone in my family, and we'd all get a library with the library ticket that slot the thing in, little piece of paper, size of a credit card, and we'd all be reading in the back of the car on the way home, and we'd get out and we'd just keep on reading. And you know, to be talking with an amplifier in a building I used to go to be shushed, it just feels like the punk's won. So it's lovely, and thank you to Deirdre. I'm also very aware that there's loads of people who I really admire are in the room and are on the panels during the day. Stephen is doing the tech and couldn't have been nicer, so really appreciate everything that you've done.
See how it goes first.
Yeah. Yeah, but even that's crap, Stephen was signed in rough trade, so that's, you know, he's got more game than I ever will have. But as a punk, it's very hard for me to say the word Genesis. But the genesis of this idea came 14 shops up the road in the record shop called Exiles. And I was in there so often that the 2 hippies eventually said, "Oh, Michael, will you mind the shop?" I'm thinking, does that mean I can choose the records? So I was able to play The Damned and Talking Heads and The Beat, and it was the greatest job I ever had. And you know, the shop went into receivership quite soon after that. But not because of me, not because of the 2 hippies. It was because we couldn't get the records we wanted in Ireland. So I remember The Cure releasing Primary, and Polydor in Ireland thought, oh yeah, that's going to be huge, so we'll get 3 copies. Rough Trade had no distribution in the south, so the records were smuggled down from the north in the cisterns of the CIE trains, and they do still smell of pee, you know, if you find those records. But there was a lad who used to come into the record shop so often, and he was friendly enough in that he would nod at you in that Dublin way. And we had a nickname for him because he had a wool hat, so we called him Dexies. Because he looked like the first Dexies Midnight Runners, that image on the first album that then Fugazi had borrowed. And I used to see him around at gigs. I remember seeing him in McGonagall's at a Virgin Prunes gig, and he was wearing a brown coat, like a long brown coat, like a storeman would wear in the 1920s, packing sacks of flour. And he had written Dead Kennedys at Virgin Prunes, and I thought, that's really cool, because it's not a black leather jacket, it's not ripped jeans, he's taken like a work garment and made it punk. Didn't see him for a while, and then my favourite band came to Dublin, Teardrop Explodes, and they played McGonagall's. I think they did 2 nights, I was there both, and it was fantastic. And even better, in Trinity on the Friday night, it was the Christmas ball, and Altered Images were booked. Life gets on, like I could die that Sunday. And Altered Images cancelled, so Teardrop Explodes, my memory is that they stayed to play Trinity, and they were fantastic. And at the end of the gig, everyone wanted more. So, being Irish, we shouted, more. And they didn't come back. And then someone from the band kind of scuttled on stage and said, sorry, we can't come back on, Julie's freaking out. I don't even know what that is. But it sounds like he's not coming back, so I accepted that. I'd got the gig, I paid my money, but that wasn't enough for some of the people in the audience. And then this bloke in a Dead Kennedys t-shirt with the sleeves ripped off, like had a teardrop explodes gig. He clearly hadn't read the dress requirements. And he got up on stage and just started going like it was 1968. Come on! Like if we all stormed the stage, I don't know what he thought was going to happen. If we all get up on stage, maybe teardrop explodes will come back on. But you won't be able to see them because we'll all be standing in front of them. So it was so illogical, and I thought that guy's a weirdo. But I need to talk to him. And we've been close friends ever since. So that was Michael McCollum. He became the Ents officer in Trinity. So suddenly I was in the music industry. His French tutor coerced us. We were innocent. Coerced us into forming an incredibly bad band. And he brought the Pogues over. He brought like some outstanding music. And he discovered a band from Finglas, a really, really good hardcore band that were never going to find a major audience. And I thought they were fantastic. I started going to see them. The more you go to a gig, the more you see the other people who go and see that band, and that's where I met Niall. So everything that's happening here today spiraled from me working in a record shop, meeting Mick, through Mick, meeting Niall, and then ended up working in the music industry and then academia. So one of the reasons I've kind of hijacked this, because I'm an egomaniac, I'm launching my book today that's really old, because I forgot to launch it. But we actually did a launch for it before and I forgot to mention the book, because I was just too excited. So this is my book. It's old. There's a few copies there. We're selling it for a tenner. And it's about music management. And I just want to give you 60 seconds about how to write an academic book. If you want to write an academic book, you write to an academic publisher. Or in my case, they approach you and say, we're interested. Would you like to write a book? I thought, yeah, I would be interested. I thought, what would I write about? And I thought, wouldn't it be cool, stroke borderline obsessive, to look at every album that ever went to #1 in the US and to look at who managed those acts. And I thought that would be a decent book. I would read that book. So I applied. You have to write a big. You have to write a mini book to get them to say, yeah, you can write a book. And what they do is they get your application and they send it out to 3 academics to judge whether it's a book that they'd like to publish. And the feedback from my proposal, I imagine, is the worst feedback ever received to a book proposal. I remember some of the words that were said about my proposed book, because they still haunt me. One of them was, not only would I not recommend this book to my students, I would warn them against it. Thought, okay, fair enough, I've triggered some guy. Another book was, it's insulting to have to read a proposal about this that doesn't mention the Black Lives Matters movement. I thought, actually, that's a fair point. And then the third one, so 2 of them hated my book proposal, and one person said, oh, I can't wait. But it would not be a complete book if it doesn't mention Blue Oyster Cult. And I thought, that's worse than the 2 people who hate the book. There's no way they're going to my book. So I wrote the book. There's a chapter about the first 4 women who ever managed an act that got to #1 in the US. 2 of them have been completely disappeared from the history of the music industry. It took a huge amount of digging and a little bit of detective work and then a little bit of guesswork. So the industry history is not fair, it's not inclusive, it's not correct. And that's really important to acknowledge. I wrote a chapter about black entrepreneurship in the #1 spot, and you know what I learned shocked me. I thought I knew a little bit about black culture in the States, but the culture and the enterprise of black individuals and black companies was far more complex and interesting and dangerous than I had realised. So that's the book. Everyone in the book got to number one in the States, with one exception. I thought, I can't not put someone in there who didn't get to number one to wreck the book. And it's The Clash. Now, The Clash never got to number one in the States. But I thought, how can I get them in the book? So here's how. There was a guy who lived in the Curragh in Kildare. His dad was in the army. Irish army guy, grows up in the Curragh. 1950s, time of absolute economic deprivation and mass emigration from the boat down there. And this guy wasn't the conventional son of an Irish army guy. He goes to London, it's the swinging 60s. He does a course in a business college. He becomes the Ents officer in the business college. And there's a guy who manages bands who thinks, that young person can put my bands on. So I'll take them out for a cup of tea. So they met. And this British music manager met the guy from the Kildare and they got chatting. They became friends. I said, I've got this band playing, will you come and see them? Our guy from Kildare goes and sees them. He thinks they're all right. He quite likes the singer, but the band hate each other. There's a load of tension. He thinks this isn't going to be one for them, for the history books. But he gets friendly with them. And the singer decides, I can't take this anymore. I'm leaving. And he asks our lad from Kildare, will you manage me? It's Rod Stewart. So we Irish have a direct involvement in the success of Rod Stewart. It's a long-term relationship and it's an incredibly lucrative relationship. In the 1970s, the two biggest selling solo artists from this side of the Atlantic in the US, it's Rod Stewart and Elton John. Our man from Kildare has so much money he doesn't know what to do. He can't spend it. Like he knows how to spend it, but he can't spend it quickly enough. So he phones his lawyer and says, is there anything that I could invest in? Can you think of anything that I could put money into that would be kind of cool and that I'd get a potential, a bit of return on? Because he says, yeah, like publishing's a good business. You don't have to put out their records, you don't have to make their records, you just give bands some money, and then every time their records get played or a copy is sold, you get a little bit. Yeah, I like that. So he asks his mates, do you know any good bands that are new? And there's a young fella that he fancies. And the lawyer tells him on the phone, yeah, there's a new band in London. I don't know if they'll make it, but they're making a bit of noise. So he says to this young fella he fancies, have you heard of a band called The Clash? The guy says, yeah, they're great. He says, okay, I gotta buy their publishing. So a man from Kildare with Rod Stewart's, the commission for Rod Stewart's huge earnings, he buys a portion of The Clash's publishing. 3-year deal, but he's got the option to renew it. We know where this story goes. The Clash become major sellers, and our guy from Kildare realises he's going to make a lot of money if he hangs on to that, and he gives it back to The Clash. Just because he can afford it, and he thinks that's how the music industry should work. So even in the middle of the majors, there's DIY, there's trades, there's favours, there are good people. And I love that a guy from Kildare did that for a band that kind of changed my life. Thank you to Denise McMorrow from my colleague for putting this event under the umbrella of the UNESCO Dublin City of Learning banner. So that's given it an extra boost and an extra kind of increase in its status. So I really appreciate that. The reason it's the music book and fanzine with no grammar, no hyphenation, is that we realised that a lot of people we admire were writing books. We wanted to celebrate that. It's very hard. It's so busy out there in the media landscape to get any attention. But we also thought that fanzines for us are just as important as books. I've learned as much. I've treasured what I've learned from fanzines as much as I've read from any book. And I was reading Boff Wally from Chumbawamba, who came to the opening last Saturday of this event. And in his book, Life's Not Like That, he quotes someone else. And they're talking about the invention of the printing press, Gutenberg, 1400s. And the person's observation was that whenever there's a huge leap in technology, in printing, in the dissemination of information, that it's often people who were not represented, who are in the margins, who are outsiders, before that leap, who make the most noise with it. And I realised that's how I've related to fanzines my entire life. Is now PA is here. PA did one of the earliest fanzines in Dublin, Nuclear Threat. There's loads of fanzine writers here, so I won't go through them, but you know, what was contained in those and the way it was presented was so appealing to me and continues to be appealing. So I just a big thank you to all the fanzine writers here. And this has been recorded, and I particularly want to thank Jude Carr from Heat magazine, which was one of the early Irish fanzines, and to Steve Averill, who designed our logo, who did the very first punk fanzine in Ireland, Steve with Radiators from Space, etc., etc. And these people laid a trail for us. And some of you continued. I mentioned Riot 77 because I love that at the previous talk. But my final note is that what you do, we need to record historically, but it's part of a continuing conversation. And it's gone to places that I never imagined. And last year, there's a fabulous annual event up in Drogheda, the Drogheda Zine Fair. And I went last year and I realised I was the oldest person in the room by far. So I felt really old for about a second. And then there was a Turkish barber across the road and I got my hair cut and felt, yeah, I'm with it. Got kind of a fade or something. But I realised that I was part of something that's not in the past, it's not historical, it keeps going. And what you've done may not be written about, it might not be read at the time, but there's someone in 20 years who might discover it and think, oh, I'm gonna leap into my own imagination and creativity of that. So during the week, my students, they have to curate their music taste. So they have to think about, how would I tell people about my music? And one of them did a presentation, and I'm going to show you a few slides from it to finish. And this is Abigail's fanzine presentation from this week. She decided to listen to an album every single day and to record her thoughts on the album. So she called it the 365. She took a picture of Susie Sue and digitally manipulated it. Original photo, whatever it did. Now, this is a business student. This is a management student. Arts management. These aren't art school students. And then, when she'd listened to the 365, she thought, I'd love to see all the covers together. So she couldn't paste them. And she had this magnificent collage. Like, if you like data, or if you're nerdy like me, I love league tables. I don't like football, but I love the league table. And so this blew me away. And then she decided to cut them all out and to coordinate them and arrange them in sequence by colour. And there are the pages in colour. And to make the colour pop, she decided, I will build a background for every one of those pages. And there's the pages laid out before she assembled them, and then she picked her top 10. And it's a beautiful artifact. I will show it to you at the break if you want to see it. And she got 0 marks, just so you know the kind of educator I am. This is a happy story for some of you. Yeah, Yes, she got no marks, because I tell them there's no marks for creativity. So this is all voluntary. So the student had finished her project and then decided, actually, I'd like to physically make it. So this is just a young person doing something that they thought they'd like to do for their own sake. And I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if everyone you met in life had done this, and before you got into a conversation with them, you could just look at what they listened to and what they liked. It would have, now my life would have been a lot easier if I'd done that in hindsight. But I just want to say to the fanzine writers, what you did, what you're still doing is affecting my life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. So I thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to the speakers, and I hope you have a lovely day. The loos are in there, they're fantastic. The building is lovely, and we're really privileged to be here. So in 3 minutes, the fanzine panel will be assembled, and thank you very much.